Charlie and Carol Gaskos were an elderly couple who moved to Santa Monica, California, sometime in early 1997 to begin a new phase of their life. For the next 14 years, they did almost nothing that was memorable, and they would be of absolutely no interest if it weren't for the fact that Charlie Gaskos turned out to be James Whitey Bulger, the notorious Boston gangster and longtime fugitive who's just beginning to serve 2 lifetime sentences. Carol Gaskos was actually Catherine Gregg, Whitey's longtime girlfriend and caregiver. The story of how they managed to elude an international manhunt for so long while hiding in plain sight is interesting. And tonight you'll hear it from the Gaskos neighbors, and for the first time, from the federal agents who finally unraveled the case with the help of a boob job and an alley cat. If you're forced into retirement with a comfortable nest egg and a desire to be left completely alone, there is no better place than Santa Monica, California. This low-key seaside suburb of LA is shared by transients and tourists, hippies and hedonists, celebrities, and lots of senior citizens attracted to the climate and an abundance of inexpensive rent-controlled apartments just a few blocks from the ocean. Places like the Princess Eugenia on 3rd Street, which is where Charlie and Carol Gaskos, a childless couple from Chicago, lived for 14 years without attracting much attention from longtime neighbors or landlords. Josh Bond is the building manager.
What were they like?
They were like the nice, retired old couple that lived in the apartment next to me.
Good tenants?
Excellent tenants. Never complained, always paid rent on time.
In cash?
In cash.
Janice Goodwin lived down the hall.
They had nothing, and they never went out. They'd never had food delivered. She never dressed nicely.
You thought they were poor?
Yes, without a doubt.
The one thing everyone remembers about the Gaskos is that they loved animals and always made a fuss over the ones in the neighborhood. Barbara Gluck remembers that Carol Gaskos always fed a stray cat after its owner had died.
She would, pet it and be sweet to it, and then she would put a plate of food, like, out here.
Mm-hmm. And she liked the cat?
Obviously. She loved the cat. And we all liked the cat, but she was taking care of the cat.
And what about Charlie Gaskos?
He always had a hat on and dark glasses. I have to say, it was mysterious to me why a lovely woman like that was hanging out with that guy, that old grumpy man. I never could figure that one out until I heard they had $800,000 something in the wall. And then I went, oh, okay,
Money wasn't the only thing found in the Gaskos' apartment on June 22, 2011, when the FBI stopped by and ended what it called the most extensive manhunt in the Bureau's history.
Weapons all over the apartment. I mean, weapons by his nightstand, weapons under the windowsill, shotguns, mini Rugers, rifles.
Loaded,
ready to go.
What had started out as a routine day for Special Agent Scott Garriola, who was in charge of hunting fugitives in L.A., would turn into one of the most interesting days of his career. After getting a call to stake out a building in Santa Monica, he notified his backup team with the LAPD.
I had 4 guys working that day, and they said, we got a tip on Whitey Bulger, and I'll see you there in about an hour. And invariably, the text will return, who's Whitey Bulger?
Really?
A few of them, I had to gently remind him who Whitey Bulger was.
That he was number 1 on the FBI's most wanted list.
Number one, yeah. Big East Coast figure, but so in the West Coast, not so much.
Mention any cartel leader.
The cops in L.A. were focused on gangbangers and cartel members, not some retired Irish mobster who hadn't been spotted in 16 years. But then few mobsters have ever been as infamous in a city as Whitey Bulger was in Boston, and his reputation was for more than just being grumpy. Besides extortion and flooding the city with cocaine, Bulger routinely performed or ordered executions, some at close range, some with a hail of bullets, and at least one by strangulation, after which it's said he took a nap. Special Agent Rich Tian, who ran the FBI's Whitey Bulger Fugitive Task Force, had heard it all.
Bulger was charged with 19 counts of murder. He was charged with other crimes. He was a scourge to the society in South Boston, his own community.
He was also a scourge to the FBI and a great source of embarrassment to Tian, Special Agent Phil Torsney, and others on the FBI task force. Years earlier, Whitey Bulger had infiltrated the Boston office of the FBI and bought off agents who protected him and plied him with information, including the tip that allowed Bulger to flee just days before he was to be indicted.
We really had to catch this guy to establish credibility after all the other issues, and it was just a matter of bringing this guy back to Boston to make sure this guy didn't die or get away with this thing.
Torsney, who's now retired, and agent Tommy McDonald joined the task force in 2009. The joke was Bulger was on the FBI's least wanted list. There hadn't been a credible lead in more than a decade, and their efforts in Bulger's old neighborhood of South Boston were met with mistrust and ridicule.
Some people, they told us right out front, you guys aren't looking for that guy. People just made the assumption we had him stashed somewhere. I mean, people really thought that kind of thing.
Despite that mindset that we're not going to help you, the FBI still got it done.
Took 16 years.
Took 16 years. Yeah, this was not a typical fugitive.
The FBI says Bulger had planned his getaway years in advance, with money set aside and a fake identity for a Thomas Baxter. During his first 2 years on the lam, Bulger was in touch with friends and family, shuttling between New York, Chicago, and the resort town of Grand Isle, Louisiana, where he rented a home until his identity was compromised. After that, it seemed as if Bulger had disappeared from the face of the earth, except for the alleged sightings all over the world.
How many of these tips do you think might have been true?
Boy, there was thousands and thousands of tips, and I don't think any of them were true.
One of the obstacles was there were really no good photographs of Bulger or his longtime live-in girlfriend, Catherine Gregg, a former dental hygienist. The FBI often noted that the couple shared a love of animals, especially dogs and cats, and asked veterinarians to be on the lookout. There were reports that Gregg once had breast implants and other plastic surgery in Boston, so the task force reached out to physicians. Eventually, they got a call from a Dr. Matthias Donnellan, who had located her files in storage.
I was trying to leave the office a little early to catch one of my kids' ball games, and I said, well, listen, I'm going to swing by in the morning and pick those up. And they said to me, do you want the photos too? And I said, you have photos? And they said, yeah, we have photos. I said, we'll be there in 15 minutes.
The breast implant lead produced a treasure trove of high-resolution Catherine Gregg photographs that would help crack the case. The FBI decided to switch strategies, going after the girlfriend in order to catch the gangster.
This is an announcement by the FBI.
The FBI created this public service announcement.
60-year-old Gregg is the girlfriend of 81-year-old Bulger.
It ran in 14 markets on daytime talk shows aimed at women.
Call the tip line at 1-800-CALL-FBI.
And it didn't take long. The very next morning, the Bulger task force got 3 messages from someone that used to live in Santa Monica and was 100% certain that Charlie and Carol Gaskos, apartment 303 at the Princess Eugenia Apartments, were the people they were looking for. The descriptions and the age difference matched, and Deputy U.S. Marshal Neil Sullivan, who handled the lead, said there was another piece of tantalizing information.
The tipster specifically described that they were caring for this cat and their love for this cat. So that was just one piece of the puzzle on the tip that just added up to saying, if this isn't them, it's something we better check out immediately because it sure sounds like them.
A search of the FBI's computer database for the Gaskos raised another red flag, not for what it found, but for what it didn't.
Basically, like they were ghosts.
No driver's license?
Exactly. No driver's license, no California ID, like they didn't exist.
That's the apartment.
That corner on the 3rd floor.
On the right-hand side?
Yep.
By early afternoon, FBI agent Scott Garriola had set up a number of surveillance posts and had already met with apartment manager Josh Bond to talk about his tenants.
He closed the door, threw down a folder, and opened it up and said, are these the people that live in apartment 303?
Did you say anything when you saw the pictures?
My initial reaction was, holy
You're living next door to a gangster.
Well, I still didn't really know who he was.
But it didn't take him long to figure it out. While the FBI was mulling its options, Bond logged on to Bulger's Wikipedia page.
I'm just kind of scrolling down, and it's like, oh, wow, this guy's serious. It's like murders and extortion, and then I get to the bottom, and there's this thing. It's like from one of his old people saying, well, the last time I saw him, he said, you know, when he goes out, he's going to have guns, and he's going to be ready to take people with him. I was like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't be involved in this.
I mean, we were sitting here laughing about it, but he's a pretty serious guy.
Yeah.
He killed a lot of people,
True.
or had them killed.
I didn't know that at the time.
Bond told the FBI he wasn't going to knock on the Gaskos' door because there was a note posted expressly asking people not to bother them. Carol had told neighbors that Charlie was showing signs of dementia.
So we were back there.
So Garriola devised a ruse involving the Gaskos' storage locker in the garage.
It had the name Gasko across it, and apartment 303.
He had the manager called to tell them that their locker had been broken into and that he needed someone to come down to see if anything was missing. Carol Gaskos said her husband would be right down.
We just rushed him.
You mean guns out, FBI,
Sure.
don't move?
Gave the words, hey, FBI, get your hands up. And hands went up right away. And then at that moment, we told him to get down on his knees, and he gave us, I ain't getting down on my effing knees.
Didn't want to get his pants dirty.
Didn't want to get his pants dirty. You know, wearing white and seeing the oil on the ground, I guess he didn't want to get down in oil.
Even at 81, this was a man used to being in control.
I asked him to identify himself, and that didn't go over well. He asked me to effing identify myself, which I did. And I asked him, I said, are you Whitey Bulger? He said, yes. Just about that moment, someone catches my attention from a few feet away by the elevator shaft.
It was Janice Goodwin from the 3rd floor coming to do her laundry.
And I said, excuse me, I think I can help you. This man has dementia, so if he's acting oddly, that could be why.
Immediately what flashed through my mind is, oh my God, I just arrested an 81-year-old man with Alzheimer's who thinks he's Whitey Bulger. What is he gonna tell me next? He's Elvis? So I said, do me a favor. I said, this woman over here says you have a touch of Alzheimer's. He said, don't listen to her, she's effing nuts. He says, I'm James Bulger.
A few minutes later, he confirmed it, signing a consent form allowing the FBI to search his apartment.
As he's signing, he says, that's the first time I've signed that name in a long time.
Was there a feeling of resignation?
I don't think he had it. I did ask him, I said, hey, Whitey, I said, aren't you relieved that you don't have to look over your shoulder anymore and it's come to an end? And he said, are you nuts?
But in some ways, Whitey Bulger and Catherine Gregg had already been prisoners in apartment 303, which appeared to be a mixture of the murderous and the mundane. Alongside the weapons and all the money, they had stockpiled a lifetime supply of cleansers, creams, and detergents. The FBI took special interest in a collection of 64-ounce bottles with white socks stretched over the top.
I said, hey, Whitey, what are these? Are these some kind of Molotov cocktail you're making? He goes, no. He said, I buy tube socks from the 99-cent store, and they're too tight on my calves. That's the way I stretch them out. I said, why are you shopping at the 99-cent store? You have $500,000 under your bed. He goes, I had to make the money last.
It's been said that one of the reasons it took so long to catch Whitey Bulger is that people were looking for a gangster, and Bulger, whether he liked it or not, had ceased to be one.
He said it was hard to keep up that mindset of a criminal, and that's part of the reason he came down to that garage. He said if he was on his game, 15, 20, 30 years ago, he probably would have sensed something there. But he said it was hard to stay on that edge, that criminal edge, after being on the lam as a regular citizen for 15 years.
The master manipulator gave credit to Catherine Gregg for keeping him crime-free, hoping it would mitigate her sentence. She's now serving 8 years for harboring a fugitive. On the long plane ride back to Boston, Bulger told his captors that he became obsessed with not getting caught and would do anything to avoid it, even if it meant obeying the law. Whitey Bulger's biggest fear, they said, was being discovered dead in his apartment, and he had a plan to avoid it.
If he became ill and knew he was on his deathbed, he'd go down to Arizona, crawl down the bottom of one of these mines and die and decompose and hope that we would never find him and still be looking for him forever.
In the early 90s, John Veasey was a man with an unusual occupation. He killed people. Veasey was a hitman in the Philadelphia Mafia and found himself smack in the middle of the bloodiest mob war in the city's history. As is often the case with hitmen, Veasey's career was a short one. When he learned his own crew might want to kill him, he became a government witness, a rat. His testimony helped send 24 wise guys to prison, some for the rest of their lives. And the Philly mob would never be the same. Today, the one-time killer is a free man, living under an assumed name somewhere in America. We've agreed not to divulge exactly where. He's married, has a good job, and says he's found God. But back in his old South Philadelphia neighborhood, not everyone believes John Veasey's story of redemption. They say he's still the same low-life thug he was 20 years ago, when the mob made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
In 1993, you were an ex-con, a laborer, and a guy walks up to you and offers you $10,000 to do what?
Kill a guy.
Were you interested?
I just said, yeah, where's the gun?
That casual?
Yeah. He said, take some time to think about it. I said, just take some time to get me the gun and let's get it done.
That's how it was for John Veasey, one bad choice after another. He grew up in the mostly Italian neighborhood of South Philadelphia, home to the city's underworld. He was the youngest of 5. His mother sold crystal meth out of her family's bakery. By his mid-teens, John was a junkie and the father of 2. By his late 20s, he had been arrested more than 60 times. He says he never aspired to join the mob, but the promise of a big payday got his attention.
I mean, you get $10,000 and you never have no money.
They were offering money to take somebody's life.
But my question to that is real simple. How many poor people are being offered $10,000 to kill somebody?
But that's not an economic issue. That's a moral issue.
It's moral if you have morals.
You had no morals.
Correct. None.
In the early 90s, the Philadelphia mob was at war. Blood and body bags routine. On one side was a group of older, Sicilian-born wise guys led by John Stanfa. On the other, younger American mobsters headed by Joey Merlino. For 30 years, George Anastasia covered the mob for the Philadelphia Inquirer. He says a young, streetwise thug like Veasey was the kind of muscle John Stanfa needed.
Stanfa was getting an enforcer. Stanfa was getting a guy who wasn't afraid to go out there and bust heads. He was getting a guy who would go out and collect money, who would go out and intimidate people, and who would go out and kill people if he was ordered to do so.
John Veasey's first hit was in broad daylight. The targets? Rival mob boss Joey Merlino and his top lieutenant Michael Ciangalini. Veasey and a partner drove up on the pair, hit the brakes, and opened fire.
Was your heart racing as you were coming down the street?
Well, I didn't really think like that. I was going to work, and part of my work that day was to kill somebody.
Joey Merlino survived the attack, but Michael Ciangalini was killed. One name off the boss's hit list.
How many names on the list?
25, 35, maybe.
If you see one of the guys on this list on the street, you take him out.
Yeah.
1 month later, Veasey struck again.
The victim, identified as Frank Baldino, was getting into his white Cadillac after having dinner at the popular Melrose Diner in South Philadelphia. Bullet casings all over.
Frank Baldino was a bartender who just about everyone in the neighborhood knew and liked, including John Veasey. But John Stanfa thought Baldino had become too friendly with the other side and wanted him dead.
Put my gun right through the window.
And this was a guy you liked?
Yeah.
If you shoot someone in the head 6 times who you like, what would you do to someone you didn't like?
I shot him 6 times in the head because I was supposed to kill him. I wanted to make sure he was dead.
But amid all the carnage, the hitman says he was volunteering as a Boy Scout leader.
Now there's a positive role model for Boy Scouts, a hitman.
I'll tell you what, the kids didn't know I was a hitman. A lot of parents were mad, but the kids had fun when I took them camping, I can tell you that.
John, do you get how crazy that sounds?
I can tell you I do, but I never really thought about it like that. I mean, I would drive by and I'd have the kids in my station wagon, and then at nighttime I might be in a Cadillac.
Hunting for people you're supposed to kill.
Yeah.
Veasey's star was rising. He was summoned to this Philadelphia hotel to become a made member of the mob. But the sacred ceremony was the last thing on his mind. He wanted the $10,000 he had been promised for his first hit.
I wanted the money. I never got the money.
Why didn't John Stanfa pay you?
He said they were saving money for the war, and I said, what are we buying, a Sherman tank? I mean, I'm bringing all this money's coming, $100,000, $50,000. Nobody's getting paid.
Those complaints did not sit well with Stanfa. A few months later, the mob boss ordered another hit, this time on Veasey. But John had an older brother, Billy, with friends in the mob. When Billy learned John might be in trouble, he pleaded with him to turn himself in, to become a government informant, a rat.
Why do it?
I don't know. I guess it was the right thing to do.
When Billy was talking to you, what was he telling you?
Told me it was the only opportunity, the only way he didn't want to watch me get executed.
Billy Veasey drove John to the U.S. Attorney's Office. FBI agent Paul Hayes, now retired, became John's government handler.
Billy understood the mob. That's why he wanted him to come in and cooperate, because he knew how the mob could turn on you and kill you in a moment. And in fact, I think he was right.
Veasey agreed to wear a wire and collect evidence, but he wasn't wearing it on the night he went to this South Philadelphia apartment with two trusted mob associates. Inside, everything was covered in plastic.
It's not normal to walk in a room with plastic, but I did. I never thought anything.
What did you think was about to happen?
They told me they were painting.
He was shot 4 times with a small caliber pistol, 3 times in the head, once in the chest.
The guy shoots you in the back of the head. They are 2 men, 2 to 1. How'd you manage to get out?
You fight. You do what you grew up doing.
He wrestled a knife from one attacker, stabbed him, and ran from the building. The legend of John Veasey was born.
This is a guy who can't be killed now. You know, you can't bring him down. And it enhances that whole reputation as a tough guy. John Veasey should have been dead that night, and he wasn't.
How do you explain that?
Poor equipment. They should have had a better gun, a bigger gun. I don't know. Maybe it's destiny. Maybe this is supposed to happen.
John Stanfa and 23 members of his crew were indicted on charges including murder and racketeering. Veasey's appearance at their trial as a government witness was eagerly anticipated. But on the morning he was to testify, he was approached by FBI agent Paul Hayes.
And I said, John, I have something to tell you. Your brother was murdered in a hit. And John crumbled to the floor.
Billy had been ambushed in his car not far from his home. 5 days later, John took the stand, giving jurors an unvarnished account of life in the mob.
He was a highly effective witness. Very good. One of the best I've ever seen.
What was so good about him?
Well, because he was genuine. This is what we did. I shot this guy, and that guy over there told me to do it.
The defense tried to diminish his testimony. They said, John, we see that you're wearing glasses. Did the government buy you those glasses? And he said, yes, they did. And he said, did the government buy you those glasses to make you more believable and credible in front of this jury? He says, I don't know, but ever since your client shot me in the back of the head, my vision's been slightly off.
All the defendants were found guilty. John Stanfa was sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms. Veasey, as part of his plea agreement, was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Plenty of time for dark thoughts of revenge.
You wanted to kill the people who killed your brother?
Them, family, it didn't really matter.
You were going to shoot them, or you gonna...
Well, I had plans to, like, inject their wives with AIDS.
What?
Yeah. I was going to bump in there with a shopping cart, like, have a little needle. They wouldn't even feel it.
That's just evil.
It is evil, but you know what? I was pretty evil, and I ain't going to try to say I wasn't.
This is John Veasey today, just another suburban homeowner trying to stay ahead of the yard work.
I have a great wife, a great family, nice home, good job.
Veasey shares his new life with Norma, his wife of 8 years. They married after John's brief stint in the Witness Protection Program.
Can you even fathom the person that he was? Or the things he used to do?
No. No, because I don't know that person. I know my husband, I know who he is, and who I fell in love with. The caring individual, that's who I know.
But John didn't rob ice cream trucks. I mean, he did some bad things.
But if God is willing to forgive, why wouldn't we? I mean, he's human.
As an ex-con, finding work was difficult. But with his wife's encouragement, Veasey talked his way into a job selling cars. Turns out he was a natural. He's earned Salesman of the Year awards and a 6-figure salary.
Do you tell customers about your past now?
Yeah.
You do?
They ask.
What might
well,
they
some
ask?
people will be like, man, you're like one of them mob guys, you know what I mean? I'm like, believe it or not, I am. You know,
Really?
but I've changed. I've autographed books for some of my customers I asked for.
The book, The Hitman, written by two Philadelphia journalists, details Veasey's criminal past and efforts to turn his life around.
Search for peace.
And on most Sundays, you'll find John Veasey here, a church near his home.
I'm not all the way there yet, but I got baptized. I'm working on with my pastor. I've been going every week now. I actually drive the bus for him.
You are a church bus driver?
Yeah. Good morning. How you doing, young lady? Good. How are you? All right. Like I always say now, I'm not who I want to be. I'm not who I'm going to be, but I'm definitely not the person I used to be.
I don't believe it.
You're not buying that car?
I'm not buying it.
Reporter George Anastasia isn't alone in his skepticism. Many in South Philadelphia don't believe Veasey is capable of changing.
He's found God because it's expedient to find God, because he's somewhere in middle America and it works to find God there. I don't think if he's back on a street corner in South Philly, he's found God. He's looking to avenge what happened to his brother. He's looking to settle scores.
His brother's murder almost 20 years ago has remained an obsession. We learned that on visits to Philadelphia, Veasey has made threats against those he thinks were responsible. Kathy Ciancaglini says she's been a target for years.
It's frightening, it's aggravating, it's intimidating.
Why would John Veasey threaten you?
He believes that my husband has killed his brother.
Her husband, John Ciancaglini, and others were tried in 2001 for the murder of Billy Veasey and found not guilty. But John Veasey maintains Ciancaglini did murder Billy as payback for his first hit when he killed Ciancaglini's brother, Michael. Kathy says Veasey has posted menacing pictures on Facebook and left her voicemails that she saved, like this one from 2011.
I don't give a if I get caught. I will get you, John. How's your wife feel about that? Maybe I'll hit her in the too. You punk.
He's the punk. He threatens me. Calls my husband a punk. He's the punk. He threatens women. That's what he does.
John Veasey lives under an alias, and few in his new community are aware of his past. But over the last 5 years, his name has appeared in at least 4 police reports. In 2008, an argument in a restaurant led to a fight.
I waited for him to take his drink, and I sized him up and I hit him with a straight, good punch, and the glass went through his face.
Veasey was arrested and pleaded guilty to misdemeanor battery. His victim required 25 stitches and plastic surgery.
Only reason it's big for me because I'm a killer. You think about it, how many of your friends had a barroom fight growing up?
John, I gotta tell you, in talking to you, sometimes I wonder if you're still just a tough guy or if you're still part of you a bad guy.
That's something you'll have to wonder, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I would say that if that's open for debate.
Lin DeVecchio was a highly decorated FBI agent who helped put some of the Mafia's most notorious leaders behind bars. He's also one of the few FBI agents ever charged with murder. It was his relationship with a violent mob informant known as the Grim Reaper that got him and the FBI in trouble. He's telling the story for the first time in a new book and to us tonight. It's rare to get an inside look at the shadowy world of informants and their handlers. It's rarer still to hear an FBI agent describe a brutal Mafia killer as his friend. But that is exactly what Lin DeVecchio told us. He says his informant's information helped cripple the mob. To get it, however, DeVecchio has been accused of making a deal with the devil.
I didn't make any bargains with the devil. I wasn't dancing with the devil. I was dancing with a guy that was very close to the devil. He was a tough guy, but that was what they were paying me to do. I got close to members of organized crime so we could eliminate them.
Do you feel like you walked up to the line?
Yeah, sure, I got close to it. I freely admit that.
In the 1980s, the Mafia was a big problem in New York City, and this was as close as law enforcement often got. Surveillance footage taken outside a mob hangout called the Wimpy Boys Social Club in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, an area then controlled by the Colombo family. One of the most notorious wise guys was Greg Scarpa, who had a reputation for brutality.
He was a made guy, a button in the Colombo family.
A tough guy, too.
Very tough. Was Absolutely fearless, one of the toughest guys I've ever seen.
His toughness may have been legendary, but what no one in the Colombo family knew was that the Grim Reaper was also a rat. In the 1960s, he had secretly provided the FBI with detailed information about fellow mobsters, but he'd had a falling out with the Bureau and broke off relations. In 1980, DeVecchio wanted Scarpa back, so he decided to take a big chance. He drove up to the gangster's home unannounced and blocked Scarpa's car as he was pulling out of his driveway.
You know, it was like, who the are you? And I said, you know, I'd like to speak with you. I do need some help. You know, I want to get schooled in the life, you know, educate me. About 2 weeks later, he called. And he said, come alone. And I did.
FBI agents aren't supposed to meet alone with informants, but DeVecchio got special permission. Scarpa was considered a top echelon informant, and great care was taken to keep their meetings secret. When law enforcement officials announced one of the most important prosecutions ever against the mob in 1985, very few people knew that Greg Scarpa's information had played a role. It was called the Commission Case.
This is a great day for law enforcement.
And it not only catapulted a young prosecutor named Rudy Giuliani into the limelight, it also sent the heads of 3 of the 5 crime families away for life. DeVecchio got promoted and ended up leading 2 organized crime squads in New York. Greg Scarpa got paid $66,000 for the information he supplied over 12 years. And when he was arrested for credit card fraud, DeVecchio helped keep him out of jail.
His career and his life and his milieu that he worked in was so different than mine that it was fascinating to me to learn about that. I like the guy. You know, I make no bones about that. I'm not ashamed of that. Doesn't mean I condone what he did.
It was a friendship.
It was a friendship, absolutely.
He was your friend.
He was.
But Greg Scarpa wasn't just a run-of-the-mill mobster. He was a stone-cold killer. He's believed to have murdered at least 12 people during the time he was an informant. DeVecchio told us that on one occasion, Scarpa even let him know he'd killed another mobster.
There was a body found in Brooklyn one day. I said, who did the work?
Who did the murder?
Who killed him, yeah. And he smiled.
What did that smile tell you?
A smile told me he did it. He didn't tell me he did it, but I knew him well enough that, you know, he gave me that knowing look like, I did it, you know I did it, and I'm telling you I did it, but I'm not telling you I did it in words.
When he smiled and you thought, okay, it means he killed that guy, is that something you would investigate?
No, no. The guy was dead. I mean, as callous as that may sound, the person who's dead is not going to bring him back.
Ellen Corcella was a federal prosecutor who worked on cases with Lin DeVecchio's squad.
You are absolutely not supposed to keep an informant on the street that is killing people.
Even if that person is giving you valuable information, which may have other arrests as a result of it?
And the question I would put to your question is, when is it valuable enough information that you let people continue to kill other people on the street?
In 1991, a war started between 2 rival factions of the Colombo family. Greg Scarpa is believed to have killed more people than anybody else. The whole time you're meeting with him during the war as an informant, he's also going around killing people.
Yes, he is. That's correct.
And did you know that at the time?
Sure. I knew that because I knew the guy he was.
But if you know the guy you're talking to stop the war is actually the guy who's conducting the war.
He wasn't the only one conducting the war. Everybody was shooting everybody.
I think that it became more valuable to him to have this informant on the street than it was to pursue other law enforcement goals.
So you think DeVecchio was protecting Scarpa?
Yes.
Protecting him, she says, by giving Scarpa sensitive law enforcement information. Prosecutors first became suspicious when Scarpa's son, who was also involved in organized crime, went on the run just before he was going to be arrested. Those suspicions grew when some of Scarpa's crew got busted and started talking to authorities.
There was at least 2 of them that told us they had a source in law enforcement, and one of them basically was the guy who stayed at Scarpa's right hand. So he saw Scarpa go off and get phone calls and then come back and say, here's an address where I think we can find somebody to kill. I just got it from my source.
After hearing what Scarpa's associates had to say, 4 FBI agents accused their boss, Lin DeVecchio, of leaking information to his informant, Greg Scarpa. One of the agents specifically remembered DeVecchio asking for addresses that ended up in Scarpa's hands. And these were no ordinary addresses. They were the suspected hideouts of mobsters Greg Scarpa was trying to kill. Did you ever give Scarpa any law enforcement information?
Never. Never.
His son disappeared right on the eve of him about to be arrested by the DEA. Did you tip him off for that?
No, I did not. I went to him and asked him. I said, do you know where he is? He says, I don't know where he is, Lin. Was he lying to me? Maybe. But he looked me in the eye and said, I don't know where he is, Lin.
The FBI launched an internal investigation of DeVecchio, which went on for years but came up with nothing. In 2006, however, the Brooklyn District Attorney charged DeVecchio with murder, accusing him of telling Scarpa who to kill and where to find them. The Brooklyn District Attorney's case fell apart when a key witness was thoroughly discredited during the trial. Former FBI agents who supported DeVecchio applauded as the charges were dismissed, but the judge who released DeVecchio criticized him and the FBI for making a, quote, deal with the devil, letting Scarpa get away with his crimes for close to 15 years. DeVecchio retired from the FBI in 1996 and now runs a private investigations business in Florida. He feels he's been wrongly accused and unfairly maligned, which is why he's written a book and is speaking to us.
We effectively broke the back of organized crime by using people such as Gregory Scarpa.
You basically gave this guy a pass because he was giving you good information.
If that's a perception that people have, so be it. I can't change their mind.
But is that the truth?
No, I don't think it's the truth at all.
You kept him out on the streets. A guy who you knew at the time was murdering people.
It's wonderful to sit in your ivory tower somewhere and say, oh, how can you do that? Well, why don't you go out in the street and try working that sometime? Try making a case. Try talking to a wise guy. Try getting that information.